Usually when we look at an ancient, like highly revered spiritual philosophy, there's this huge tendency to treat it with kid gloves.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like we walk through a museum, we look at this beautiful, 500-year-old painting, and we just admire the brushstrokes.
Right. You look at the interplay of light and shadow, the cultural context.
Exactly. We marvel at the aesthetics, but we rarely pause to actually ask if the paint itself is a trap.
Which is such a dangerous thing to ignore, honestly.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive, where we are essentially taking a scalpel to poetry.
I love that framing, a scalpel to poetry.
Yeah, because today we're putting a breathtakingly beautiful spiritual tradition, which is Shuddhadvaita.
Or pure non-dualism. Yeah. Established by Vallabhacharya.
Right, Vallabhacharya. We are putting that under the microscope of this razor-sharp, very modern psychological system known as the AP framework.
And just for those mapping this out with us, AP stands for authentic psychology.
Which is super clinical, right?
Very. It's a precise framework built specifically to test the actual, authenticity of spiritual and psychological liberation.
So it's basically this fascinating collision of worldviews. We are bringing two entirely different realities together for you.
Yeah, to answer a question that sounds really simple on the surface, but is actually psychologically quite dangerous.
Which is, do our spiritual beliefs actually free us? Or do they just, give our egos a very fancy, highly respected disguise?
Culturally approved costume for the ego, basically.
Exactly. But to understand why we even need to bring a psychological scalpel to this conversation, we really first have to understand the profound, almost magnetic appeal of Vallabhacharya's philosophy.
Right, because it wouldn't be a trap if it wasn't appealing.
So true. On its face, Shuddhadvaita is an incredibly poetic view of the universe. It views Brahma, specifically the deity Krishna, as the ultimate absolute truth.
And it characterizes this truth with three specific words, right? Sat, Chit, and Ananda.
Truth, consciousness, and bliss. Which just sounds, it sounds amazing.
Well, yeah. Those three words are literally the foundation of its psychological appeal.
Because who wouldn't want that?
Right. When a philosophy tells you that the ultimate fabric of reality is constructed out of consciousness and bliss, it provides this immense sense of existential safety.
It's like, oh, the universe has my back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It frames the universe as a fundamentally benevolent place.
Oh.
And Vallabhacharya actually took this a step further, making a crucial distinction that separates Shuddhadvaita from a lot of other ancient traditions.
You're talking about the whole Maya thing, right? The rejection of Maya.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of ancient traditions tell us that the physical world, your daily routine, your body, your financial struggles.
The mundane stuff.
Yeah, that it's all an illusion. It's Maya, this fake simulation, a trap that you just need to wake up from and escape.
But Shuddhadvaita completely rejects that premise.
Completely. Vallabhacharya argued that the world is not a fake illusion. The world is entirely real.
Which is kind of refreshing, honestly.
It is. He framed the physical world as a pure, deliberate, and playful manifestation of Brahma.
The term used in the literature is Leela, right, a divine play.
Yes, Leela. And within this framework, the individual soul, or the jiva, isn't some separate, sinful entity wandering through a cosmic punishment.
Like we're not just serving a sentence here.
Exactly. The soul is a genuine, integral part of Brahma itself.
Okay, so the message for you listening is essentially, you are real, the world is real, and everything around you is part of this beautiful, divine game.
A joyful game, yeah.
But if we accept that premise, the obvious question becomes, well, how do we achieve liberation within that game?
Right, because you still want liberation.
Yeah, and the sources point out that liberation here isn't about, sitting in a cave meditating for decades until you just vanish into an empty void.
No, not at all. It's achieved through a path called Pushtmarg.
Which translates to the path of grace, I think.
That's right. In this philosophy, liberation is not this wage you earn through grueling mechanical effort or severe asceticism.
You don't have to punish yourself.
No. It is achieved strictly through divine grace and intense, unyielding devotion to Krishna. It's all about active participation.
So you surrender yourself in devotion, and then divine grace just lifts you up.
Yes, allowing you to participate in that eternal, joyous, divine play.
So instead of enlightenment being pitched as, a single drop of water vanishing into a silent, empty ocean.
Which can sound kind of bleak to some people.
Totally bleak. Shuddhadvaita pitches it as getting like a VIP pass to the ultimate eternal cosmic dance.
You get to retain a sense of participation in the joy.
Okay, but this is where I hit a wall, or at least a fascinating paradox, because this sounds incredibly liberating, joyful, affirming.
It really does.
So why in the world would a modern psychological framework, like the AP framework, have any problem with a philosophy that simply wants human beings to experience divine love and bliss?
Well, the AP framework doesn't just blindly attack things. It is a really precise analytical tool. So before we examine where the friction actually lies, we have to look at where these two systems actually align.
Because they do agree on some things, right?
They do. The framework gives a really rare nod of approval to a few foundational elements of Shuddhavaita, starting with that very rejection of the world as an illusion.
Oh, right. So the AP framework completely agrees that the physical world, the body, the suffering we experience, all of it is real.
Yes. It vehemently argues against escapism.
Right, because running away from the world, like rejecting your body or retreating to a mountaintop or just totally isolating yourself from society.
The framework identifies all of that as moving on a horizontal axis.
You're just changing your scenery.
Exactly. You can trade your business suit for a monk's robe or, move your physical location from a busy city to a quiet ashram.
But you aren't actually elevating your consciousness, you're just moving laterally.
Because you bring your mind with you. Escapism doesn't solve the core problem, because the core problem is never the external environment.
It's the internal structure of the ego.
Spot on. Telling someone the world is fake doesn't dissolve their ego. In a lot of cases, it just gives them a philosophical excuse to become completely apathetic to their surroundings.
Wow, yeah. And Shuddhavaita actually avoids that psychological trap entirely by validating the reality of the world.
It does. So both systems agree that the world is real and that running away is just totally futile.
Okay, so they agree on that. And doesn't the framework also appreciate Shuddhavaita's emphasis on bhakti or devotion?
It does, and this is but there is a very specific, highly demanding condition attached to that appreciation.
What's the condition?
The AP framework appreciates devotion only if it functions as a constant, agonizing internal struggle.
Agonizing. So devotion is not seen as a passive, warm, fuzzy feeling.
Absolutely not. It must be an active arena where the ego is forced to continuously, like moment by moment, choose self-surrender over its own self-preservation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the clinical language of the framework, this genuine bowing down to something greater, this active dismantling of the self-preservation instinct, that is the true definition of love.
Okay, wait. If the AT framework values devotion as this mechanism for surrendering the self, and Shuddhavaita is literally built entirely around intense devotion and surrender to Krishna.
I know where you're going with this.
It just seems like we're looking at a perfect match here. The theoretical foundations seem to point in the exact same direction.
They seem to, yes. But the divergence doesn't happen over the act of devotion itself.
Then where does it happen?
The friction points emerge when we examine what that devotion is directed toward, and crucially, what happens to the internal psychology of the ego during the process.
Okay.
Which introduces the first major critique from the AP framework, the danger of the positive entity.
The positive entity trap.
Right.
Because Shuddhavaita establishes a positive entity as the ultimate truth.
Exactly. It characterizes Brahma as pure bliss, absolute love, a divine personality.
And the AP framework argues that the moment you define a positive entity as the ultimate goal, you have inadvertently handed the ego a brand new, incredibly shiny object to latch onto.
Yes, because the ego is fundamentally a survival machine. It operates by attaching itself to identities, desires, goals.
It needs something to hold on to.
Always. So when a seeker adopts a philosophy that promises bliss and divine connection, and they start claiming, I am a part of Brahma, or I am a beloved of Krishna,
we have to look really closely at the actual architecture of that statement.
Precisely. The subject of the claim has changed, right? But the claimant, the I, remains completely intact.
It's so tricky. It's like someone deciding to shed their materialistic ego by giving up their luxury sports car and walking everywhere.
Oh, I love this analogy.
But then they spend all their time bragging to everyone about how humble their carbon footprint is.
Yes. The ego hasn't been dismantled at all.
It just traded a Rolex for a monk's robe. It completely rebranded itself.
That's it, exactly. And the framework refers to this phenomenon as building spiritual scaffolding.
Spiritual scaffolding.
Yeah, because the ego is highly adaptable. It will literally use a beautiful, culturally respected philosophy as a new vocabulary to dress itself up.
To justify its own continued existence.
Right, and might even justify its worldly attachments and avoidant behaviors by suddenly labeling everything as divine play.
Oh, that's dangerous. I'm not avoiding my problems, I'm just participating in the Leela.
Exactly. It is the ultimate self-preservation tactic, perfectly hidden behind the mask of advanced spirituality.
But I mean, I have to challenge this a bit, because if you tell someone they shouldn't aim for bliss or truth or a connection to something beautiful, what is the alternative?
Fair question.
Because human psychology naturally requires a target. If aiming for a positive entity just feeds the ego, how does the AP framework suggest we navigate liberation without giving the ego a new toy?
Well, the alternative offered by the framework is known as the via negativa approach.
The way of negation.
Right. The framework asserts that after the ego truly dissolves, what remains cannot be named at all. It cannot be categorized with positive attributes like bliss or divine lover or absolute truth.
Because the very act of giving something a name requires a namer, right? And the namer is, by definition, the ego. Like, if there's an experience of cosmic bliss, there must be a separate entity sitting there actually experiencing it.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
As long as the experiencer remains, the ego remains.
Mm.
Therefore, true liberation in the eyes of the framework isn't arriving at this glorious, positive destination. What remains is simply an absence.
Just absence.
The total unmitigated absence of the experiencer. There's no divine lover. There's no cosmic dance to participate in.
There is only the profound silence of absence.
Yes.
I mean, that concept completely undercuts the psychological comfort of Shuddha-Advaita, because Valapattarya is telling the seeker, you are already a part of the divine. You just need to realize it.
And the AP framework responds by saying that telling a human being they are already divine is literally the fastest, most effective way to make their ego indestructible.
Because it acts as a soothing balm for the ego, precisely when the ego should be made profoundly uncomfortable.
Exactly. You're giving it comfort when it needs a scalpel. And that mechanism of soothing leads us directly to the second massive collision between these two sources.
Right, because the ego doesn't just use the goal of bliss as a trap. It actively uses the method of getting there as an excuse.
Yes, the method being grace. It uses grace as an excuse to avoid doing the actual work.
Which brings us to the clash over Pushtamarg, the path of divine grace. Because Shuddha-Advaita claims that your own personal grueling efforts to achieve liberation are secondary.
Right. The primary engine of salvation is God's grace.
Yeah.
The seeker just surrenders, and grace does the heavy lifting.
And I'm guessing the AP framework has a big problem with that.
Oh, it rejects this entirely. It views any reliance on external grace as a direct violation of a core concept it calls sovereignty.
Sovereignty. Meaning what, exactly?
Sovereignty is the strict, totally uncompromising rule that absolutely nothing from the outside can make the choice to dissolve the ego for the ego.
Nothing at all. Not a revered guru.
No.
Not an ancient tradition or like a tragic life event.
Not even that. And certainly not divine grace. External circumstances might provide a wake-up call, sure, but they cannot replace internal intent.
So grace, even if we define it as, external circumstances aligning perfectly, it might create the ideal environment for realization.
Right. It can set the stage, but it cannot force the door open.
The ego alone has to make the active, excruciating choice to dismantle its own architecture.
Yes. You simply cannot outsource that psychological intent to a higher power.
It's literally the spiritual equivalent of hiring a stunt double to go to therapy for you.
That is hilarious and terrifyingly accurate.
Right. Like, you want the psychological breakthrough, but you want someone else to undergo the discomfort of actually doing the emotional labor. You outsource your own homework.
That's exactly what you're doing. And the framework categorizes this specific avoidance tactic as the Y equals FXE error.
Oh, the math equation.
Yeah. And it considers this error to be one of humanity's most deeply ingrained lies.
So if we look at this mathematically for a second, we're treating enlightenment like an equation. Y is the goal, right? The liberation.
Right.
And we mistakenly believe that Y is a function of external variables. Let's call them X and Z. So maybe finding the right teacher is X and receiving a moment of divine grace is Z.
Exactly. We convince ourselves that if we just align X and Z, then Y will naturally occur.
We are just waiting for the variables to solve the problem for us.
We tell ourselves, if Krishna smiles on me, if the universe deems it time, then I will be free.
But the framework insists that why is solely a function of internal intent. It has absolutely zero external dependencies.
None. The psychology behind waiting for external grace is actually this brilliant, deeply deceptive trick the ego plays to manipulate the timeline of its own survival.
Because waiting requires time. And if you are waiting for an event to happen in the future, you are virtually guaranteeing that you get to survive in the present.
It's so insidious. The framework puts it really ruthlessly. The one who is waiting for grace is the ego itself.
The ego loves the concept of waiting.
Oh, it thrives on it. It allows the ego to adopt the posture of a humble, patient seeker, while entirely avoiding the terrifying act of immediate self-dissolution.
It's like saying, I'm not resisting my own dismantling, I'm just, simply waiting for divine timing.
A total masterclass in psychological self-deception.
It really is.
Yeah.
But we have to address the fallout of this collision for you listening, because if relying on grace is an illusion, if aiming for bliss is a trap, and if the final destination is just the terrifying absence of the self,
Yeah.
what is the actual utility of a philosophy like Shuddhadvaita according to the framework? Do we just throw it out?
No, we don't discard the philosophy, because the sources are actually very clear on its functional utility.
Okay, good.
The ultimate value of Shuddhadvaita, or honestly any beautiful, poetic, spiritual system, is merely as a mirror.
A mirror.
Yes. A mirror doesn't do the internal work for you, but it reflects exactly what is true in the present moment.
So if you are engaged in intense devotion to Krishna and in that specific act of singing or praying, the claimant, the I, actually disappears for a second.
Then that experience holds profound value. The philosophy facilitated a moment of true absence.
So it's the honesty of the moment, not the theoretical structure of the philosophy that does the heavy lifting.
Exactly. The theory that you are Brahma or that the world is Leela, that's just intellectual scaffolding. But if your devotion momentarily thins out your ego, the mirror is reflecting genuine surrender.
But on the flip side, if your devotion just makes you feel like, a special, chosen, highly advanced spiritual being who somehow possesses a deeper understanding of the universe than everyone else.
Then the philosophy has just become a new food source for the disease.
Wow. Which represents a direct, unavoidable challenge to anyone interacting with these concepts.
It really does. We are looking at the foundational way human beings process their own beliefs. And it doesn't matter whether you are studying a 16th century Indian philosopher or engaging in a modern self-help routine or just following a daily meditation practice.
You have to audit your own psychological architecture. And we really mean you, listening right now. Are the philosophies you study and the devotions you practice actually thinning out your ego?
Or are you just using the vocabulary of spirituality to construct a more comfortable, unassailable disguise?
Are you taking the medicine, or are you just wearing the medicine bottle as a necklace to signal to the world how spiritually attuned you are?
Ouch. But yes, that's the question. And that audit requires a terrifying level of self-honesty.
Because the ego will weaponize everything.
Everything, even the noble desire to destroy the ego will use that to sustain its own existence.
You will happily appropriate the language of absolute surrender to completely avoid the reality of actually surrendering.
Which brings us back to the museum, looking at that beautiful, centuries-old painting under the harsh light of the microscope.
Yeah. The promise of eternal bliss, of divine play, of being rescued by external grace, it is intoxicating.
It's beautiful.
But the scalpel of the AP framework doesn't care about the aesthetic beauty of our beliefs. It only cares about the underlying psychological truth.
And the truth it reveals is that no philosophy, no matter how poetic or historically revered, can do the internal work for you.
No amount of external grace can rescue you from the responsibility of your own intent.
That's the hard truth.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If true liberation is total absence, as the framework suggests, then we have to completely reframe our expectations of what spiritual success actually looks like.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It wouldn't be a profound, dramatic sense of cosmic peace or a VIP pass to a divine dance. It might actually look like complete, unbothered, entirely ordinary life. So ask yourself, if every name, title, and positive spiritual identity you've ever claimed for yourself was suddenly stripped away, who or what would actually be left standing in the silence?
Are you prepared for your enlightenment to be entirely boring?
Until next time.